Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. We're not improvising a story today, we're just talking about it. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to talk to you about our latest story. We are talking about our Wild West, Merlin-inspired Knights of the Round Table folk hero fighting possibly Dracula story. If you have been listening for the last couple weeks, you have heard us as we have laid out a story that takes place post-Civil War. This is an alternative future where Lincoln did not die at the play. And did you know? Okay, here's a fun fact. I was just at Mount Rushmore for the 4th of July. Did you know that the first shots fired of the Civil War were on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina? You knew that, Reed? I'm looking at Reed, and he obviously knew that. But did you know that the flag that the Union officer was allowed to take off the pole when he retreated, right? The Confederate Armada who took it allowed him to take the flag so that it was Fort Sumter was never actually conquered, right? Because the flag was never captured. And the same day that the flag was the same flag by presidential decree by the same officer was returned to Fort Sumter.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Do you know what day that was? That was the same day that Lincoln went to the play.
Oh.
So it was this huge reunification effort to say, look, we are actually the same.
Yeah.
But it was kind of overshadowed a little bit by the president getting shot in the head.
Oh, I would say so. Yeah.
Anyways, in our story, Lincoln was not shot, and instead, reunification efforts were put in place. But Mirrodin, the one-eyed wanderer, the old man, the wizard of the Knights of the Round Table, basically met a bunch of folk hero knights. He'd been awake since the American Revolution and had to go to sleep, and he met them all at Devil's Tower at the top, obviously, where he has his, it's Merlin's tower. And he met them there, and he sent them off, telling them that some great other pain, some great other conflict was going to happen. Like, we know that after the Civil War, that there was a lot of disunity and that there was a lot of conflict and strife, and that eventually, about 80 years later, there was was it 80 years later there was the World War I?
No, a little less.
It was only about 60.
60.
Yeah, it's 80 years from the Revolution to the it was 80 years from the Revolution to the Civil War. That's what it was. Yeah, so but that didn't happen, and what we found out was that there was the pen that is mightier than a sword. The pen crafted by Merlin and Benjamin Franklin that Thomas Jefferson used to write the Declaration of Independence that could channel a person's conviction into what they wrote. And it was lost because it could steal a person's conviction, and then you could write whatever you wanted, which is what John Wilkes Booth attempted to do to Abraham Lincoln, but failed to do, which was kill him, soak the pen in his blood, and then he could go and write whatever he needed to write, and it would sway people.
The greatest reinterpretation of Shakespeare's Hamlet and the world has ever known.
Yeah. The John Wilkes Booth plays. Anyways, so this story basically takes place kind of in the frontier land west, in the western parts of America, as the Lone Ranger tries with his compatriots, the Lone Ranger, who's of course the grandson of, who was it, Davy Crockett?
Yep.
Yeah.
And with his sort of cohort of inventors and American government officials, try to prevent the pen from being moved west to the ocean to where it could just disappear off into the European and the Asian continents. And then essentially what happens is both Seth and Reed had happy ending and sad ending. So the happy ending is that they're successful and that America kind of grows up reunified after the Civil War, not with the false unity that kind of in some places took place after Lincoln's death, but with like the true unity that Lincoln had in mind. And they become a powerhouse, but they also become kind of isolationist. They become incredibly successful, but they do not participate in any wars or conflicts. They just grow in power and isolation. And so in some ways that's a happy ending because, everything in America prospers and blooms. But what also happens is a lot more people die in the eventual conflicts, to a place that Teddy Roosevelt, when he is when he is president, Merlin actually comes back from his not so restful sleep. And basically, all of this story is basically the download that Teddy Roosevelt is getting during his, his initial sort of release into being president, right? And Merlin comes in right at the end and kind of chides them about, like, your success was not for you alone. Like, you were meant to be the light in the darkness, not the caged city on a hill that shows forth light but doesn't invite those who are humble and willing to come in. Anyways, that's a kind of a happy and a sad ending. I thought it was good. And it's also really interesting because after we recorded last week, went and just camped and spent the whole week. So I've been to Devil's Tower recently and Mount Rushmore and all around that area. Deadwood and all that kind of stuff. So it was really cool. But welcome, guys. What rating would you give this story?
I gave it an 8. I liked the story a lot. I thought it was getting up there for honorable mention.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to think about. It really, my imagination was piqued. I love the whole idea of setting and how setting can help a story. And, kind of in this alternative history, you just talked about you just spent the week out camping Black Hills area.
Yeah.
Like, one of the most fascinating places is the whole Deadwood, South Dakota, which is like in a gulch. And it's this rugged terrain, and you wouldn't even know. It was like a hideout for criminals because you had to have the secret kind of decoder ring special knowledge of how to find your way into this. I love the word gulch is like a valley, but it's like much steeper sided and it's more hidden, and forested mountains and fast water running through it, and it's cool. And then the wise old man in our story that Levi introduced was the grandson of Davy Crockett, who became the Lone Ranger, and he had a secret hideout where that was included an abandoned silver mine, and he would cast his own bullets from the silver that he could, there was still a vein that was working there. And then, after the Lone Ranger was trying to reconstitute the Texas Rangers, and there's another kind of a hideout that I had actually been to back in the 70s, a place in the panhandle of Texas called Paladuro Canyon. And it's really cool because having grown up in the Red River Valley and seeing the expanses of the high plains from North Dakota, all the way down through Nebraska and Kansas, eastern Colorado, and by the time you get to the panhandle of Texas, it's the topography is little changed, if maybe a little drier, in the vegetation and whatnot. But then you're going along, and all of a sudden the view just drops away, and there's this breathtaking canyon. And it's spectacularly beautiful. And you go down in the little water courses and stuff there. It's much more highly vegetated, much more highly and much greener than the surrounding countryside. And it's really fun for me just imagining that this is the hideout of some of the original Texas Rangers, Gooding, Oliver Gooding and Charles Goodnight, and they are the founder of the Gooding Goodnight Trail, where they would gather cattle from the ranches and then work their way north to the railheads in like Kansas and whatnot. But they had to brave Comanche raiders and stuff. It's just a kind of an interesting time. A lot of fun history.
Absolutely. My rating is probably comes with a caveat. It's probably a 9.6. I love the idea of doing alternate histories. I love alternate histories. They're very cool. Asking the question, what if? Mm-hmm. And then trying to extrapolate the resulting. It's like we just assumed that Teddy Roosevelt would become elected as president in our story, even though if Abe Lincoln had stayed alive, who knows who would have preceded him and who would have went after and what, we don't know. But all we can do is sort of it's the truest form of science fiction to take modern day and then put some number, add 3 zeros, and say this is what humanity would be. Dune does it, but they thankfully give themselves like 30,000 years in the future. So it's a lot easier for them but we are doing like, not that many years in the future. So it's a 9.6 because I love that, because the American spirit and the American countryside and the American world, the world of America, is so awesome, is so beautiful, is so like, this was a country founded by risk takers, by adventure seekers, by people willing to put it all out on the line. And you can see that in the resulting, even now, right? 250 years later, you can see that is, in my opinion, what American exceptionalism is that we are all the products of people who came over in ships or came over in bigger ships.
Yeah.
Who came over in ships made of wood, or who came over in ships powered by steam, or who came over in ships powered by diesel, right? Who risked it. Even the people who came over with visas and to go to school, you're still risking it. If you come from another country and you're like, that's insane. Mm-hmm. And so it's really fun to imagine what could have been, but it's difficult because we talk about things like what was Lincoln's actual plan for reunification, and there's a lot of hard subjects people want to believe about racism, inherent racism, and all those sorts of things inside of American culture. And it can seem kind of offensive if we say, if Lincoln hadn't died, none of that would have happened, but I think it's a thing I'd like to know more about, I don't think that I'm personally prepared to write how Merlin helped the founding fathers and Lincoln win various wars and things. Yeah. But it'd be a cool and interesting it'd be an interesting story to take Excalibur after it fell out of myth and legend, that Merlin was taken to or traveled to America before the Revolution, and then was the same kind of guiding force, never taking the position of king himself, never taking the position of power himself, but was that kind of guiding force. And then would go to sleep and come awake at certain times, depending on what was needed. And then our folk heroes, just like the Knights of the Round Table, are kind of like folk heroes. Our folk heroes were inspired by, kind of uplifted to their ultimate potential. If we think about, I'm like going all around here. If we think about like what Adam and Eve were intended to do. If we think about Ransom in the C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, and like his involvement, his interaction with Merlin, it's like this all would be a really cool story to write. Yeah. But I would have to do like years of historical reading, because a lot of my knowledge is surface level, and I think alternative histories are hard. But 9.6.
Yeah, and of course I'm not surprised, because I got one of the story elements that I drew was fighting style. Well, it just lends itself to gunslinger. Right. And Stephen King's that was the flagship first entry in the Dark Tower series, his book, The Gunslinger, and it was, wasn't it that gun was literally forged from the shards of Excalibur?
Yeah, and then hidden in a pyramid somewhere.
Yeah, and it's so cool. And then like with the the technology changes during and immediately after the Civil War. The whole notion of, muzzle loaders where you pour powder down the barrel and then put a patch on it and ram a ball down the thing, and then you fire the gun and it blows off this charge and shoots the bullet out. Well, to go from that within just the span of the Civil War to loading pre-manufactured cartridges, where you've got the bullet in a metal cartridge with the gunpowder, and you load it into the breech and hit the firing pin and it shoots it. It just streamlined the whole idea of, I think of the Battle of Gettysburg, the Devon's cavalry. got to this town of Gettysburg ahead of the Confederate infantry, and they had just been issued the Spencer carbines where they could load and fire much more quickly. And so it's a force multiplier, and then you have the wise old man, is Davy Crockett's grandson, and he's like the Lone Ranger, and he's forging silver bullets, for his enchanted 6-shooter, and I don't know. It's the Gunslinger, the Dark Tower series is such a fascinating thing because of the alternate threads of reality spinning off. You have The Stand, which is one of the side threads of that Dark Tower series, and there's it's cool.
I've always thought about making a grim dark being the genre, a grim dark story, or even a D&D game based around Lone Ranger vampire hunter.
Yeah, of course, silver bullets.
Yeah, silver for werewolves, but gold for
I'm
gold
sorry,
for vampires.
I'm not.
I don't know, the lore is different, but I always thought it would be an interesting thing, and maybe that idea I've had a while ago that just been kind of rattling around in my brain, in and of itself could be folded into this, because that would be a part of this story. Seth, what's your thoughts? What's your rating?
Well, not to be like the rain on the parade and Dippy Downer, but my rating is like a 2.
All right, moving on from Seth's opinion. So what I really liked, yeah, give us your.
So I mean, one with alt history that's going to be difficult. I like it, but difficult to get things right. I feel that at least initially, conceptually, this would be interesting, but didn't find that much of anything went anywhere. And kind of given the topic of it, it's, unless, again, a lot of time was put into making it all work. And I think that even at that point, you would still end up with something like Wild Wild West, Sky Captain, World of Tomorrow, or what's the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
All excellent movies. Total flops, but excellent movies.
Exactly, where it's like, wow, it's like right on the edge of
Reed, have you seen Sky Captain and the World Tomorrow?
No, I liked League of Extraordinary. As soon as this story came up, I was thinking League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Here's an irritating bit of trivia for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Wild Wild West. What's his name in Wild Wild West? The black guy? What's his name? Will Smith was offered Neo, but he took Wild Wild West instead.
Okay.
Oh.
And League of Extraordinary Gentlemen features all the MGM monsters, classic monsters and stuff. And not Kevin Costner, Sean Connery. Sean Connery? Yes.
The 007 guy?
Well, Sean Connery was in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right?
Yeah.
Yes. He was offered Gandalf in the first Lord of the Rings and thought nobody wants to see a fantasy. What people want is like an action one.
Yeah. Seriously? He would have been a fantastic Gandalf.
I know.
Oh, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that just more speaks to Seth's point, is that both of them were offered much. Neither of those movies really went on to do much. Wild Wild West was kind of crazy and interesting, and I thought that League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was good, but I think Seth is right on both accounts.
And don't get me wrong, all three of probably Wild Wild West, sorry, I have a missing tooth, and so it catches my tongue. Wild Wild West is probably my least favorite of those three.
Yeah.
Well, say there's one I'm not familiar with. What was the other one?
So it's Sky Captain, World of Tomorrow. It's
you can't just. I'll have you watch it. It's a crazy and interesting movie, and I'll set it up so you can watch it. Okay. I think it's very good. I saw it in theaters. I thought it was really awesome. But it is a weird, older. It's good. We'll see it. It'll be fine.
Okay. The way I would describe it would be like one of those things that, again, like, not to say that like part of the premise and the idea, like, they are very cool, and it's like I want to like them a lot, but like maybe it's just the media type that they took.
Yeah.
But it's just like to do them and actually get it all, like, let's say like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. you've got Captain Nemo, right? And you've got David Livingston, and you've got, Dracula in there, and you've got, is it Helsing is in there?
Yeah, you got a Helsing in there. You have the Dorian Gray.
Yeah, it's like...
You've got Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
I think the Invisible Man.
The Invisible Man.
It's like
yep.
a bunch of stuff like that, and then it's like kind of like putting them together in this like Avengers kind of, what's the DC one? Justice League kind of idea. Right.
Yeah,
So then it's like recreating and making something, but it also is only taking place inside of like an hour and a half.
Well, it was supposed to be like there's supposed to be another one and another, there's supposed to be more.
Yeah, but I think it just like gets to that point where it's like really great idea.
Tom Sawyer
like,
was in it.
Was he?
Yeah.
Can't remember.
He's in a Secret Service guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but it's like I don't know. It just I don't know how else to explain it, but it's just kind of like really great idea, but perhaps getting it like put together in the right way that doesn't come across
right. It needed
cheesy.
It needed a book series beforehand. It needed a couple of a couple of standalone TV shows about all the different characters, kind of like how Avengers ended up doing. You got a couple of movies about a couple of the different characters, and then you got Avengers. Not everyone got their own movie right away, but Hulk had a couple previous movies. There was an Iron Man, there was a Thor, which introduced Loki, and then you got an Avengers, all of them together, and then, Ant-Man got his own movie, and then, you just did these little tiny offshoots, Spider-Man, and then to kind of flesh out the story, but then you had lots of money. I think as a book, though, it could do well, personally, I think, as long as you took it slowly, focused on one thing at a time, didn't try and do the whole story at once. Even if you just started with Merlin setting foot before, a couple of years before the American Revolution, and then just told that story and built that up, and then you could jump forward, to something else, and then you could do your little shoot-off stories, like, did you guys ever read the Alvin Maker series by Orson Scott Card?
Yes.
That was kind of like an alternative.
Yeah. I didn't read the whole series. I think I remember reading the first book, but then I never finished
Is that
the rest
Seventh Son of a Seventh Son?
That is it's the first one, yeah.
I think I read the whole thing. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I had a bit of a, I'm not trying to be like... Orson Scott Card is a really awesome person, and I've watched interviews by him. But he is definitely a Mormon.
Yeah.
He belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints. They don't like being called Mormons, apparently. So there's that. When you read them, there's that kind of bent to it. It's like, okay, it's America, and crazy things are happening. This is kind of like what you believe is your religion.
Yeah.
And so I read a couple of them and then I stopped because I just couldn't. I think I read all the way to Prentice, which I should read the rest. I think I'll try and make that commitment to read the rest of them because that would be good. So your rating was really low, Seth, because it's really hard to do historical fiction.
Yes and no, but like that's given that. Again, with what was brought to the table and like kind of how it rounded out in what like happened, it kind of put me in the same boat. Like I'd look at like for reference those three movies, something that had like a lot of things that could be really cool, but just so many loose ends and kind of like, I don't know, how do you really put that together in some of this kind of all a little bit of a different like scientific like because that's where it's like with the I think Wild West is like this, and so is the Sky Captain one, where it's like this particular time era, but then it's like, oh, we've got these other higher tech things, but it's like, how do you wrap that inside of trying to keep a little bit of a kind of a truer history, but like it just, I don't know, it just.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like the Wild Wild West definitely as a specific genre, as a specific movie all by itself. Definitely, it took some ridiculous liberties, just like the Wild Wild West original TV series from 1965, right? That ran from 65 to 69. That also took some, like, liberties, And so I think that's just kind of in the same vein of taking liberties, That
was a great time for TV. That was my teenage years.
Yeah.
And, we had Wild Wild West and Star Trek,
Yeah. There's also the fact that we know that like the CIA has had cell phone level technology since like the 80s, like smartphone level technology since like the 80s. Like,
oh yeah, no, I know
so,
that.
In essence, it would be kind of crazy, but it would also be a kind of fairly accurate. It might be kind of wacky.
Do you remember the TV series 24?
Yes.
And he had that was pre-smartphone.
Kiefer's
his Palm Pilot. He could like. I thought that was so fascinating that that was cutting edge. When was it? The early
2000s.
Yeah, where it was, his capacity, his connectivity, and all that was he could download. He could access all this information. It really created a fun. And now it's just kind of ho hum.
Yeah, that's what an interesting TV show.
Oh,
what a great concept! Each episode being 1 hour of a 24-hour sequence.
Yeah,
That's cutting edge TV, in my opinion. Because they can always. I remember my dad would be watching it, and they would always cut at the very end. It'd be like, ding, ding. It'd be like 58, 56, 57, 58, 59, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then the TV show would be over.
Yeah. And of course, the famous one for that is High Noon with Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
Where it literally takes place in the amount of time that you're sitting in the theater, the 2 hours that you're sitting in the theater. And then, of course, it glances around like what is happening concurrently, so you can fill out the whole story, but it's really cool the way they.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's one of those movies that they make you watch in a cinema class in college,
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
Because it's got Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
So I think that I personally will probably, because I've been having some troubles writing this other novel that I've been working on, some trouble staying inspired. But I think that I will do some research into the post-Civil War landscape where the Lone Ranger would have done his deal. Read up more on Davy Crockett. Read up more on the Alamo.
Yeah, I love the idea of that, the Alamo being like a meeting place for some of these people. And then with the Jim Bowie. I mean, the Bowie knife. He was a master craftsman first and foremost, but then became just this. The scene when they found him, he was actually sick in bed, and he took 6 Spanish soldiers with him with his Bowie knife. I mean, when they burst into his barricaded room,
yeah,
it must have been a fearsome operation right there.
Yeah. But I'm going to write a little bit, Seth, and then I'm going to send it to you. And I'm never going to release it to the world unless you say, I think this is good enough to release. Till I can teach you to formally recant your 2 rating. How does that sound, Seth?
Okay.
That's how
confess. Confess. All right, I confess. No,
recant. All right. Any other thoughts you guys had? Any other inspirations you guys had that you want to bring up? Anything else you want to say about these stories before we bid our viewers, our listeners, adieu?
I can't remember what did we call this story? What was the name of it?
This one was called Folk Hero Showdown.
Oh yeah.
Which it's unfortunate. I think of the title for the story at the first episode, and then I can't really change it because I've started to release them already. And so it's kind of like, I probably would have chosen a different name than Folk Hero Showdown, but here we are.
Well, the first episode of this one I wasn't in on, and I can't remember what the conflict was, or if I was whatever. But I thought you guys started it off really well, and I really enjoyed it. So thanks.
Absolutely, Seth. Anything else from you?
No, I think that's it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. Join us next week as we tackle another story. It's going to be a good one. I have the feeling deep in my guts it's going to be a great one. If you have any questions about our process, about our ideas, about our reading lists, what we have and haven't read, send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We'd be happy to publish our currently reading. We'd be happy to take recommendations on what we should read next. And until next time, don't forget to wait, because it gets better.